Red Bull built something so extreme, even their own driver can't control it. A car that changes behavior, corner by corner. A car that literally shifts balance in the middle of a lap. And right now, it looks like a disaster. 3 races. Outside the top positions. Unstable. Unpredictable. Even Verstappen saying it feels impossible to drive. But here's the part nobody is seeing. This is not just a problem. It's a prototype. Because hidden inside that instability is a system no other team has. A connection between engine, energy, and balance. So aggressive that if Red Bull manages to control it, they don't just fix the car. They unlock a performance ceiling no one else can reach. And the scariest part? No team can copy it. Because no team built their car this way in the first place. At first, it just looks like failure. That's the easiest way to explain it. 3 races. Low points. A car that doesn't respond the same way twice. 1 lap it feels stable. The next lap, completely different. And for most teams, that would mean one thing. They got it wrong. Completely wrong. But Red Bull's situation is different. Because the data doesn't match the results. And that's where things start to feel strange. Because even with all these problems, the RB22 still shows flashes. Moments where it suddenly comes alive. Moments where the pace is there. Not consistent. Not reliable. But real. And that's the detail that changes everything. Because a bad car doesn't do that. A bad car is just slow. Predictable. Limited. But this car is something else? Because what Red Bull is fighting is not a lack of performance. It's a lack of control. And those are 2 very different problems. Because if you lack performance, you need to find speed. But if you lack control, the speed is already there. You just can't use it. Now think about what's happening inside that car. Every time the driver enters a corner, the balance is not fixed. It's changing. Depending on energy. Depending on how the MGUK is working in that exact moment. Whether it's deploying or harvesting. And that transition happens instantly. From pushing the rear forward to pulling it back. From acceleration to regeneration. And when that happens, the entire car reacts. Weight shifts. Grip changes. The rear becomes unstable. Then stable again. All within fractions of a second. And the driver is trying to predict something that doesn't behave the same way twice. That's why it looks like a nightmare. Because right now, it is. But here's where everything flips. Because no other team is dealing with this. No one else has a car where the energy system is this deeply connected to balance. Which means no one else is exploring this space. No one else is learning how to control it. And that's where Red Bull is operating. At the edge. Between instability and something much more powerful. Because if they solve this, if they smooth those transitions, if they make the car predictable again, without losing that dynamic behavior, they don't just gain consistency. They gain adaptability. A car that can change its own characteristics within the lap. Now imagine what that means. Low battery. The car behaves one way. High deployment. It behaves another. Different phases of the race. Different behaviors. All optimized. All intentional. And suddenly, you're not driving one car. You're driving a system. One that adjusts itself in real time. And that's something no setup sheet can replicate. No wind tunnel can simulate perfectly. No rival can copy quickly. Because this is not about adding parts. It's about understanding interactions. Deep ones. Between engine, energy, and chassis. And Red Bull is already inside that process. Which means what we're seeing right now. All the instability. All the frustration. All the inconsistency. Is not the final product. It's the unfinished version. The raw form of something much bigger. And if they manage to finish it, this stops being a weakness and becomes the most advanced concept on the grid. The kind of concept that doesn't just make you faster. It makes everyone else irrelevant. But here's where this turns from a technical challenge into something much bigger. Because what Red Bull is dealing with right now is not just instability. It's timing. Perfect timing. Because while the rest of the grid is optimizing, refining, polishing concepts that already work, Red Bull is doing something far more dangerous. They are learning. And learning in Formula One is more powerful than being fast too early. Because every problem they're facing right now is teaching them something no one else understands. How energy affects balance. How deployment changes grip. How the car behaves when the battery is not full. When it's not empty. But constantly shifting in between. And that knowledge is not visible on lap times. It's invisible. Until the moment it isn't. Because once Red Bull understands this system, they don't just fix the car. They control it. Completely. And that's the difference. Because right now, the RB22 is reacting to energy. But in the final version, energy will react to the car. Controlled. Predictable. Optimized. Now think about what that means in a race. Not just one lap. An entire race distance. At the start. Full battery. Maximum deployment. The car behaves aggressively. Sharp. Responsive. Perfect for attacking. Mid-race. Energy fluctuates. The system adapts. Smoother balance. Better tire preservation. More control. And in the final laps, when everyone else starts losing performance, Red Bull could be doing something no one expects. Releasing energy. In a perfectly controlled way. Maintaining balance. Maintaining grip. Maintaining speed. While others fade. And that's where races are decided. Not in the first corner. At the end. Where consistency matters more than raw pace. But here's the part that makes this almost impossible to fight. Because how do you prepare for a car that doesn't behave the same way twice? How do you simulate it? How do you predict it? You can't. Because even if another team understands the idea, they don't have the architecture. They don't have the integration between systems. They don't have the same starting point. Which means copying it is not just difficult. It's unrealistic mid-season. And by the time they even try, Red Bull is already ahead. Already refining. Already evolving. Now here's the key detail. Red Bull doesn't need this to be perfect immediately. They don't need to dominate right now. They only need progress. Step by step. Smoothing the transitions. Reducing the unpredictability. Keeping the advantage. And that's exactly what they're doing. Quietly. Behind the scenes. Because every race, every lap, every problem is feeding into that final version. The one they're building toward. The one no one has seen yet. And when that version finally appears, It won't look like an upgrade. It will look like a transformation. Like the car suddenly makes sense. Like everything clicks. And the instability disappears. But the advantage stays. And that's the moment the entire grid will understand. Too late. Because what looked like a failure was never a failure. It was development. At a level no other team was willing to attempt. Which leads to the final realization. Because if Red Bull really pulls this off, if they turn instability into control, if they convert chaos into performance, then this is not just an upgrade story. It's something much bigger. It's the moment Formula One changes direction. Because from that point on, every team will be forced to ask the same question. Not how do we go faster, but how did Red Bull build something we don't even know how to start copying? And this is where everything finally comes together. Because what Red Bull is building is not just faster. It's smarter. Not in the traditional sense. Not in strategy. Not in setup. In behavior. Because for decades, Formula One cars have followed one rule. Be stable. Be predictable. Be consistent. That's how you extract performance. That's how you win. But Red Bull is quietly breaking that rule, because instead of forcing the car to behave the same way all the time, they're allowing it to change, to adapt, to respond to energy in real time. And once they control that, they unlock something no one else has. A car that is not limited to one setup, one balance, one behavior, but multiple, all inside the same lap. Now imagine the implications of that. Qualifying lap. Maximum deployment. The car becomes aggressive. Sharper front end. More rotation. More risk. But more speed. Race stint. Energy managed. The car becomes stable. Predictable. Gentle on tires. Optimized for consistency. Final laps. Everything on the line. Energy released with precision. Balance maintained. Grip preserved. Performance sustained. And all of that without changing a single mechanical part. Just through control. Through understanding. Through a system no one else has built. And that's the real upgrade. Not something you can see. Not something you can photograph. Something you feel. Something you experience. Only when you drive it. And that's why no team can copy this. Because copying requires understanding. And understanding requires time. Data. Mistakes. Exactly what Red Bull is going through right now. Every unpredictable corner. Every unstable lap. Every frustrated radio message is part of that process. Because they are mapping something new. Something deeper. Something no simulation can fully capture. And by the time they finish that map, by the time the behavior becomes predictable, by the time the system is fully under control, it's already too late for everyone else. Because they won't just be behind in performance. They'll be behind in knowledge. And in Formula One, that gap is the hardest to close. Now this is the moment everything shifts. Because when Red Bull finally stabilizes this concept, the narrative changes instantly. From struggle to dominance. From instability to precision. From confusion to control. And when that happens, all the races we've seen so far, all the problems, all the criticism, will suddenly make sense. Because they were never signs of failure. They were signs of something unfinished. Something in development. Something no one else dared to build. And that's the final truth behind this story. Because Red Bull didn't just create a difficult car. They created a new way of thinking. A new way of extracting performance. A new way of designing a Formula One machine. And once that idea works, once it proves itself on track, the rest of the grid won't be asking how to beat it. They'll be asking something much more uncomfortable. How did we miss this completely? While Red Bull was building it right in front of us?